All right, guys, I did the videos in reverse order. I did your assignment video first and now your main read. Anyhow, when you're done, you'll have finished your context clues, but at the end of that video, I forgot to tell you to put these back in your Wednesday folder. So after the next video, after you finish filling this out, back into your Wednesday folder. All right, our main read this week. Our genre is still a fantasy. It's the story of the cricket in Times Square. Now, this story is a whole book, and if you were in class, I'd show you where you can find it in my class. There's a whole chapter book about this story, and we're going to take just one short chapter of it. We're going to take the short chapter about, well, when a cricket shows up in Times Square. And Times Square is actually a place in New York. All the skyscrapers in New York in this one area of Times Square have to have neon built-in screens on the side of their buildings. It's pretty crazy. And they have these big, huge commercials running on these screens, or these TV shows running on screens, the whole side of it. And it's all lit up. It's bright. And, well, Times Square is always famous also on New Year's Eve, because that's where the ball drops. They have this big, huge ball that drops. 10, 9, 8, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year! And they have this huge party. It'll be interesting to see what they do this year, if they're able to have that party or not, with everything that we have going on. But so we got this little story inside of a big story, located in New York City, and it's a cricket. Now, there wouldn't be many crickets in New York City. You know, crickets live in the grass, and in New York City, it's mostly all concrete and huge buildings. Now, they do have a park there. It's a huge park in New York City, and obviously crickets could live there, but this cricket's going to find himself, well, in a place he probably shouldn't have been. Now, it's a little bit longer read, so get comfortable, get your reading book out, and read along with me. Here are our main characters. We have a cat, we have a mouse, and we have a cricket, which is kind of strange because we know the cats eat mice. Okay, well, it's a fantasy, so we're going to find out that these characters do some things that aren't quite true. Chester. Tucker Mouse had been watching the Benellis and listening to what they say. Next to scrounging, eavesdropping on human beings was what he enjoyed the most. So the mouse is always looking for food, and he's always listening to humans talk. That was one of the reasons he lived in Times Square subway station. As soon as the family disappeared, he darted out across the floor and scooted up to the newsstand. At one side, the boards had separated, and there was a wide space he could jump through. He'd been in a few times before, just exploring. For a moment, he stood under a three-legged stool. Now you can see this picture to help you understand it. There it is, a three-legged stool, letting his eyes get used to the dark. Then he jumped on it. Psst! He whispered, "Hey, you up there? Are you awake?" There was no answer. "Psst, psst, stay!" Tucker whispered again, louder this time. From the shelf above came a scuffling, like little feet feeling their way to the edge. "Who is that going?" "Psst," said the voice. "It's me," said Tucker, "down here on the stool." A black head with two shiny black eyes peered down at him. "Who are you?" "I'm a mouse," said Tucker. "Who are you?" "I'm Chester Cricket." So now we got our main characters, and it's definitely a fantasy because they're talking, and they're talking to each other. There's the cricket, and there's the mouse. Said the cricket in his high musical voice. Everything he said seemed to be spoken on an unheard melody. "My name's Tucker," said Tucker the mouse. Can I come up?" "I guess so," said Chester. "This isn't my house anyways." So we got the mouse who's trying to be friends to the cricket. Remember, our essential question was, what makes a new friend feel welcome? Well, let's find out. Tucker jumped up beside the cricket and looked him all over. "A cricket," he said admiringly. "So you're a cricket. I've never saw one before." "I've seen mice before," the cricket said. "I knew quite a few back in Connecticut." "Is that where you're from?" said Tucker. "Yes," said Chester. I guess I'll never see it again, he said wistfully. How did you get to New York? Said Tucker Mouse. Oh, it's a long story, sighed the Cricket. Tell me, said Tucker, settling back on his haunches. He loved to hear stories. It was almost as much fun as eavesdropping, if the story was true. Well, it must have been 3 days ago, Chester Cricket began. I was sitting on the top of my stump, just enjoying the weather and thinking how nice it was that summer had started. I live inside an old tree stump next to a willow tree, and I often go up on the roof, the stump, to look around. And I had been practicing jumping that day, too. On the other side of the stump, from the willow tree, there's a brook. Are you visualizing all this? He's sitting on a stump, and he's out in the Connecticut, out in the country in Connecticut, and there's a brook there that's like a stream. He's jumping back and forth across it to get my legs in condition for summer. I do a lot of jumping, you know. Me too, said Tucker Mouse, especially around rush hour. Now that's a joke, because in New York, there's not a lot of vehicles. A lot of people walk. They live in skyscrapers, and they walk to the next skyscraper where they work, or to the next skyscraper where they can go to a cafe. And so there's tons and tons of people on the sidewalk. Can you imagine a mouse on there? And he's scooting in between all the people walking. It was kind of a joke. And I had just finished jumping when I smelled something, Chester went on. Liverwurst, which I love. You like liverwurst? Tucker broke in. Wait, just wait. Now, I'm really super sad because I love doing fun things in 4th grade, and one of the most fun things is to bring food to school and share it with you guys. And on this story every year, I usually bring in some liverwurst. And, well, liverwurst is not quite, in my mind, as good as sausage or ham or salami, but it is good. I bring some little crackers, and I cut it up, and I put on the crackers, and I give it to you, and obviously we can't do this year. So ask your parents to buy a little thing of liverwurst, and cut yourself a slice and put it on a cracker and see if you like it. You might. Some kids love it, some kids don't, and we usually have a fun Friday snack when we read this story. Oh well, I'm going to have liverwurst for lunch today. Maybe you can ask your parents to get you a little some of it. One leap, he sprang down all the way from the shelf to the floor and dashed over to his drain. Chester shook his head as he watched him go. He thought Tucker was a very excitable person, even for a mouse. Inside the drain pipe, Tucker's nest was a jumble of paper, scraps of cloth, buttons, lost jewelry, small change, and everything else that you can be picked up in a subway station. Tucker tossed things left and right in a wild search. Can you just picture him chucking stuff left and right, and he's trying to find... Well, neatness was not one of the things he aimed for in life. At last, he had discovered what he was looking for. A big piece of liverwurst he had found earlier that evening. It was meant to be for breakfast tomorrow. Ooh, I don't think I can eat liverwurst for breakfast. But he decided that meeting his first cricket was a special occasion. Holding the liverwurst between his teeth, he whisked back to the newsstand. Look, he said proudly, dropping the meat in front of Chester Cricket. Liverwurst. You can continue the story, and we will enjoy a snack too. That's very nice of you, said Chester. He was touched that a mouse he had just known for a few minutes would share his food with him. Just knowing somebody for a few minutes would make you an acquaintance. I had a little chocolate before, but besides that, nothing for 3 days. Eat, said Tucker. He bit the liverwurst into 2 pieces and gave Chester the bigger one. So you smelled the liverwurst. Then what happened? There's a good picture of him eating the liverwurst and the cricket eating the liverwurst. I hopped down from the stump and went off towards the smell, said Chester. Very logical, said Tucker Mouse, munching with his cheeks full. Exactly what I would have done. Hey, that was exactly what I'd have done, too. I love snacks. It was coming from a picnic basket, said Chester. A couple of tuffets away from my stump, the meadow begins, and there was a whole bunch of people having a picnic. They had hard-boiled eggs, cold roast chicken, and roast beef, and a whole lot of other things besides the liverwurst sandwiches. which I smelled. Tucker Mouse, he moaned with pleasure at the thought of all that food. They were having such a good time laughing and singing songs that they didn't notice me when I jumped into the picnic basket. Oh, gross. Crickets in your picnic basket? Continued Chester. I was sure they wouldn't mind if I just had a taste. Naturally not, said Tucker Mouse sympathetically. Why mind? Plenty for all. Who could blame you? Now, I have to admit, Chester went on, I had more than a taste. As a matter of fact, I ate so much that I couldn't keep my eyes open. Now, next week is Thanksgiving. I don't know if this happens at your house, but sometimes we have this big Thanksgiving feast, and then you eat so much for Thanksgiving, and then you try to have a piece of pumpkin pie afterwards, and I'm stuffed. And now I get real tired and sleepy, and usually on Thanksgiving we go deer hunting, and I go out to my deer stand and I start to fall asleep, and that's not a good thing. Well, he ate so much he's fallen asleep, and what with being tired from jumping and everything, I fell asleep right there in the picnic basket. The first thing I knew is somebody had put a bag on top of me that had the last of a roast beef sandwich in it. I couldn't move. Emmett and Tucker exclaimed, trapped under roast beef sandwiches. Well, there are worse fates. At first, I was too frightened, said Chester. After all, I thought they probably come from New Canaan or some other nearby town. They'll have to unpack the basket sooner or later. Little did I know, he shook his head and sighed. I could feel the basket being carried into a car and riding somewhere, and then being lifted down. That must have been the railroad station. Then I went up again, and there was a rattle-roaring sound, the way a train makes. By this time I was pretty scared. I knew every minute was taking me farther and farther away from my stump. That's his house, remember. But there wasn't anything I could do. I was getting awfully cramped, too, under those roast beef sandwiches. Didn't you try to eat your way out? Said Tucker. I didn't have any room, said Chester. But every now and then the train would give a lurch. That's a jerk. And I managed to free myself a little. We traveled on, and then the train stopped. I didn't have any idea where we were, but as soon as the basket was carried off, I could tell from the noise it must be New York. You never were here before? Tucker added. Goodness no, said Chester, but I've heard about it. There was a swallow, no, that's a bird, I used to know, who told about flying over New York every spring and fall on her way to the north and back. But what would I be doing here? He shifted uneasily from one set of legs to another. I'm a country cricket. Don't worry, said Tucker Mouse. I'll feed you liverwurst. You'll be all right. Go on with the story. It's almost over, said Chester. The people got off one train and walked in and got another, even noisier than the first. Must have been the subway. Now, subway trains travel underground in tunnels. That way the sound gets trapped in there, and that makes it a lot louder. I guess so, Chester Cricket said. You can imagine how scared I was. I didn't know where I was going. For all I knew, they could have been heading for Texas. Come all the way to Connecticut for a picnic? It could happen, said Tucker, nodding his head. Anyways, I worked furiously to get loose, and finally I made it. When they got off the second train, I took a flying leap and landed in a pile of dirt over in the corner of this place where we are. Such an introduction to New York, said Tucker. To land in a pile of dirt in Times Square subway station. Tisk, tisk, tisk. And here I am, Chester concluded forlornly. I had been lying over there for 3 days not knowing what to do, and at last I got so nervous I began to chirp. That was the sound, interrupted Tucker Mouse. I heard it, but I didn't know what it was. Yes, that was me, said Chester. Usually I don't chirp until later in the summer, but my goodness, I had to do something. The cricket had been sitting near the edge of the shelf. For some reason, perhaps it was a faint noise, like padded feet tiptoeing across the floor. He happened to look down. A shadowy form that had been crouching silently before in the darkness made a spring and landed next to Tucker and Chester. Watch out, Chester, the cricket shouted. A cat. He dove himself into the matchbox. Now, we don't know about this matchbox, but this boy had picked the cricket up and made a house for him in the matchbox. That was part of the story that we hadn't read. Remember, this is a chapter book. Oh no, cat, mouse, looks like the end of the poor mouse. Chester buried his head in the Kleenex. He didn't want to see his new friend Tucker Mouse get killed. Back in Connecticut, he had sometimes watched the one-sided fights of cat and mice in the meadow, and unless the mice were near their holes, the fights always ended the same way. But the cat had been upon them too quickly. Tucker couldn't have escaped. There wasn't a sound. Chester lifted his head and very cautiously looked behind him. The cat, a huge tiger cat with gray-green eyes and black stripes along his body, was sitting on his hind legs, switching his tail around his forepaws, and directly between the forepaws, in that very jaw of his enemy, sat Tucker Mouse. He was watching Chester curiously. The cricket began to make frantic signs. Look up, look up, look up. The mouse should look up and see what was looming over him. Very, very casually, Tucker raised his head. Excuse my yawn. The cat looked straight down at him. Oh, him, said Tucker, chucking the cat under the chin with his right paw. That's giving him a little love tap. He's my best friend. Come out of the matchbox. Chester crept out, looking first at one and then the other. Chester, meet Harry Cat. And Tucker, Harry, this is Chester. He's a cricket. I'm very pleased to meet your acquaintance, said Harry Cat in a silky voice. Hello, said Chester. He was sort of ashamed because of all of the fuss he'd made. I wasn't scared for myself, but I thought cats and mice were enemies. In the country, maybe, said Tucker. Boy, this mouse is smart. But in New York, we gave up those old habits long ago. Harry is my oldest friend. He lives with me over in the drain pipe. So how was scrounging tonight, Harry? So the mouse is now asking the cat. Not so good, said Harry Cat. I was over in the ash cans on the east side, but those rich people don't throw out as much garbage as they should. Chester made a noise again for Harry. Chester, make that noise again for Harry, said Tucker Mouse. Chester lifted the black wings that were carefully folded across his back, and with a quite expert stroke drew the top one whoosh over the bottom. Shrum echoed through the station. Lovely, very lovely, said the cat. This cricket has talent. I thought it was singing, said Tucker. But you do it like playing the violin, with one wing on the other, so those cricket sounds don't come from their throats. Yes, said Chester, these wings aren't much good for flying, but I prefer music anyhow. He made 3 rapid chirps. Tucker Mouse and Henry Cat smiled at each other. It makes me want to purr to hear it, said Harry. Some people say the cricket goes chee, 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 explained Chester, and others say treat, treat, treat. But we crickets don't think it sounds like either of these. It sounds to me as if they're going crick, 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 said Harry. Maybe that's why they call him a cricket, said Tucker. They all laughed. Tucker had a squeaky laugh that sounded as if he was hiccuping. Chester was feeling much happier now. The future didn't seem as near as gloomy as it had over in the pile of dirt in the corner. Are you going to stay a while in New York, said Tucker. I guess I'll have to, said Chester. I don't know how to get home. Well, we could always take you to Grand Central Station and put you on a train going back to Connecticut, said Tucker. But why don't you give the city a try? Meet new people, see new things. Mario likes you very much. Now, we don't know about Mario, but that's the boy. That's the boy who had found the cricket and helped him by putting him in that little matchbox and putting a tissue in there for his bedding. All right, so we can see these two, the cat and mouse, are trying to make the friend feel welcome in New York City. They gave him food, they visited with him, and they listened to his story. All good, friendly things to do. Guys, I know it's getting a little bit long, but we only got a couple pages left. Hang in there. Yes, but his mother doesn't, said Chester. She thinks I carry germs. So this Mario, the boy's mom, doesn't want him to keep the cricket. Germ, said Tucker scornfully. She wouldn't know a germ if it gave her a black eye. Pay no attention to that woman. Too bad you couldn't have found a more successful friend, said Harry Cat. I fear for the future of this newsstand. It's true, echoed Tucker sadly. They're going broke fast. He jumped up on a pile of magazines and read off the names in the half-light that slanted through the cracks of the wooden cover. Art News, Musical America. Who would read them but a few long hairs? Now, long hairs sometimes are people that are musicians. Rock stars grow their hair really long sometimes. And so this newsstand is selling things that only a few people would buy. Not a very good way to make a living. Now, maybe if they got like Sports Illustrated in there or Time magazine, a lot of people read those. I don't understand the way you talk, said Chester. Back in the meadow, he listened to bullfrogs and woodchucks and rabbits, even a few snakes, but he had never heard anyone speak like Tucker Mouse. What's a long hair? Tucker scratched his head and thought for a moment. A long hair is an extra refined person, he said. You take an Afghan hound, that's a long hair. Do Afghan hounds read Musical America? Asked the cricket. They would if they could, said Tucker. Chester shook his head. I'm afraid I won't get along in New York, he said. Oh, sure you will, squeaked Tucker Mouse. Henry, suppose we take Chester up, show him Times Square. Would you like that, Chester? I guess so, said Chester, although he was really a little leery of venturing out into New York City. I would be too. The three of them jumped down to the floor. The crack in the side of the newsstand was just wide enough for Harry to get through. As they crossed the station floor, Tucker pointed out the logical sites of interest, such as Nedick's lunch counter. Now remember, he's a mouse, so he's going to go places where he can find crumbs to eat. Tucker spent a lot of time around there. And Lost Candy Store. Then they came to the drain pipe. Chester had to make short little hops to keep from hitting his head as they went up. There seemed to be 100 of twistings and turnings and many other pipes that opened off the main route, but Tucker Mouse knew his way perfectly, even in the dark. At last, Chester saw a light above them. One more hop brought them out onto the sidewalk, and there he gasped, holding his breath and crouching against the cement. They were standing at the corner of the Times Square building, which at the south end of Times Square. Above the cricket, towers that seemed like mountains of lights rose up into the sky. Even this late, the neon signs were still blazing. Reds, blues, greens, and yellows flashed down at him, and the air was filled with the roar of traffic and the hum of human beings. It was as if Times Square was kind of a shell, with colors and noises breaking in great waves inside of it. Chester's heart hurt him, and he closed his eyes. The sight was too terrible and beautiful for a cricket who up to now had measured the high things by the height of the willow tree and the sounds of the bubble of a running brook. How do you like it? Asked Tucker Mouse. Well, it's quite something, Chester stuttered. You should see it on New Year's Eve, said Harry Cat. Gradually, Chester's eyes got used to the lights. He looked up, and way far above them, above New York and above the whole world, he made out a star that he knew was a star he had looked back at Connecticut. When they had gone down to the station and Chester was in his matchbox again, he thought about that star. It made him feel better to think that there was one familiar thing twinkling above him amid so much that was new and strange. Now, we worked on predictions a while ago, and it says, make a prediction whether Chester will return to Connecticut or stay in New York. Use the story detail to support your prediction. Well, I predict that he's going to stay in New York for a little while. Why? Because he's got a couple friends here. And let's find out. Oh, no. That was the end of the story? They kind of give you that little cliffhanger there because they want you to pick up the book. It is entitled Cricket in Times Square. And you'll hear more about this Mario and the family and the newspaper and the mouse and the cricket and the cat. And you can check it out if you'd like to. All right, guys. Then the next video, you'll have your reading assignment. And then put that folder back into your Wednesday folder. God bless your day.